So the story starts many years ago, and we're on a flight back from one of our customer conferences from San Francisco to Sydney, and I was sitting next to this guy here. If you don't know who this man is, this is John Michelle. He was our former VP of engineering at Atlassian, and the poor guy didn't know how much I could talk. So probably what was supposed to be a 14-hour flight probably felt like 18, 20 hours for him. Anyway, we talked about a lot of things about what was making Atlassian successful at the time. And one of the things we reflected on was, different kinds of teams, well-funded teams, teams with the right balance of skills, cognitive diversity, all that kind of stuff. And we zoomed into a particular topic, which was the kinds of engineers we had in teams and how that seemed to be very critical to helping us scale our success in a product and across the organization. And I'm not talking about the kinds of engineers that are like front-end and back-end engineers, but more about where their interests lied. Engineers that are passionate about scaling a platform, or engineers that are excited about solving some computational or machine learning style problems. And one of those engineers we landed on was an engineer that John Michelle had phrased as a product engineer. And I'd first never heard this phrase before, and said, product engineer, what does that mean? So John Michelle tried to go ahead and explain what a product engineer did. Since then, I've tried to codify this in a series of blogs internally and externally on what I think a product engineer is from my experiences. And quite frankly, with my 11 years time at Atlassian, I can definitely say this has been a critical ingredient to most of the successful projects I have worked on. You need different kinds of engineers on lots of projects, and one of those engineers you need is a product engineer to help Atlassian build successful products and scale our product teams all the time. So when I reached out to John Michelle when I was writing this blog post, and I said to him, if you had to, phrase in your words, what would it be? He talked about how, engineering as a discipline has a lot of focus and schools and is growing, etc. But once engineers build this foundation, that you get these engineers who want to engage in the why. Why are we doing this? And so they want to connect the technologies and the advancements they can do there with a customer problem, and they have an empathy for the pain points there to help solve this particular problem. So I'd like to check out those links for more detail. But today, what I wanted to do was spend some time with you talking about the importance of these product engineers and how you can think about being one, because Atlassian needs more of them. I'm Sharif Mansor, and I've been doing product management at Atlassian for about 11 years now, and I'm here really because I'm convicted that they're a critical ingredient to helping Atlassian scale. They helped us scale. When I joined, the Confluence team was probably 15 odd people with a lot of product engineers. There was no product manager at the time when I had joined. And you could see already that, product engineers were helping scale the product craft across the organization. And they've helped us scale as we've grown from 15 to 50 to 100 to a couple of hundred, now many thousand employees across Atlassian. You should really mute your phone before you record a video. Terrible choice. I'm not re-recording that, so you guys can just stay with us. Anyway, so I'm here to talk about product engineers. So I want to share with you guys what they are, why we need more of them, and what you can do to try and be one. Now, I think I've already talked about why we need more of them. They certainly help us grow as an organization and a critical part of our product success. I'm going to spend more time on what they are and how you can try to be one. If that's what you self-identify with, great. We need more product engineers. So I'm going to jump straight into it by reflecting on the attributes that I have seen product engineers have at Atlassian. So the first attribute that stands out is they're often seeking a lot of early feedback. What I mean by this is that they're looking to get feedback as early as possible and as often as possible. And the kind of feedback I mean is more the validation type of feedback, to avoid really just spending many months writing code. And so maybe they'll do some prototypes or some they'll work with design and PM to do fake mock-ups or etc. Whatever it is, any sort of way where we can get feedback and confidence that we're on the right direction. So I often find product engineers are pushing their product team to think about how can we get feedback early before going too deep down anything. So that's something you want to be thinking about all the time. Could be voicing your opinion in a planning meeting, or could be having a discussion with your product manager or your designer at the time about shortening those feedback cycles before you go into long engineering cycles. The second attribute I've seen them do a lot is they bring what you might call as healthy conflict or healthy tension by really just encouraging really just good rigor debates. I know I've certainly felt way more accountable and have had to double down my homework and often realize sometimes I'm wrong and we need to change direction because of the accountability that these product engineers give to me. They keep me on my tiptoes and make sure that I'm not being a lazy product manager and that I'm always focused on the right thing. They'll often ask things like, what if we don't do this? Sharif, is this really the most important thing we should be doing? Are you really, really sure? Or they'll often just trying to get clarity on a problem, will often debate and wrestle with the problem. An important thing to remember is you're not wrestling with the person, but you're wrestling with the topic or the idea that's happening right now. But this healthy tension ensures that we can produce a better outcome for our customers. It's always been the case. Then the third thing I've seen attributes-wise is these product engineers often have strong opinions, but they're loosely held, and these opinions are formed through some sort of customer interaction or some customer data points, but they're willing to change. I think the important thing here is starting with a point of view. We're very fortunate at Atlassian. We build software that we get to use a lot of the time, if not all the time. Now, I've spoken to product managers in finance companies and product managers in physical hardware or in insurance. They don't get to use the products that they use all the time. Now, I'm not saying that we're our own customer all the time and we should ignore everything customers say, but that already helps us. That gives us a strategic advantage. If you think about it in many ways, it would be silly to ignore all our internal knowledge of how teams work together and purely focus on customers. And same token, vice versa. If something doesn't work for us but works for a customer, something should be, we should be digging into that. But either way, I guess my point here is that starting with a point of view and then going with the approach of proving or disproving that often leads you to an outcome much faster than starting with no point of view, where you'll often just spin around in circles and actually not get to a particular outcome or decision, or often you lose the sense of progress. And so product engineers will often start with a point of view and change it as you learn. Your point of view will change. Mine changes all the time. Fourth attribute is you'll often find these engineers quickly build intuition, and they'll do this through a series of interactions or with data or customers, and able to sort of, if you like, extrapolate a set of patterns or common themes in feedback or possible problems. And you'll often see an engineer say something like, well, we're working on this, but it's likely we're going to get this feedback because of this data point. Or we've seen a similar pattern with this other problem. It's an adjacent problem, but when we tried this worked well, or this didn't work well. So often that's how you sort of build intuition. It's through a series of experiences where you sort of got that a lot of data points over time. Now, as these product engineers start to build this context and start to build some intuition, etc., I found these product engineers, and maybe you're doing some of this already. That's awesome. You'll end up owning backlogs and driving decisions, and do this because of the context that they have. And what I mean by owning a backlog, for me, I often think about as a product manager, why is it that someone may come to me and say, what are we doing next? What context do I have that other person does not have, that they can't take the decision for themselves to prioritize, this thing or take a decision themselves? It's often meaning there's a gap in a shared brain, if you like, that we're building together. Product engineers are involved in that shared brain building process, and therefore they're able to take ownership. For those who know the difference in a product manager and a product owner does more of the Scrum Master type of responsibilities, breaking requirements down to smaller tasks and deliverable chunks, etc. Often product engineers are really mini product owners. They're just taking product owner-like responsibilities. Part of that responsibility is often communicating inside and outside the team. At Atlassian, we have a strong, if you haven't picked it up already, a strong collaborative culture where we blog our celebrations and our achievements and our learnings. We blog our failures. We should do more of them. But often these product engineers become the internal face for the feature that they're working on, and they've taken ownership of that. They're often engineers that also spent time thinking about how can I maximize the value and minimize the time taken. So they'll think about what are edge cases that I can avoid, or what edge cases that can be put to later, or what do we need to address now. Some of the edge cases we need to address now might be a critical product area you're working on, but they're often thinking about how can I minimize my effort there to maximize value. And the flip side, because they've got so much domain context, they're often coming up with suggestions with quick wins and ideas and how we can get to a particular outcome. If they're aware of the outcome we're shooting for, they're doing that. So these are 8 behaviors that I've seen product engineers do. Now I spent some time reflecting on them in preparation for this talk, and I was like, what are the common, mindsets that I've seen in these 8? And so if I zoomed out a bit, I found some common groupings, if you like. So I'm going to walk you through that now, and maybe there are things that you can take away that you can go back to your product teams and start doing more of. If you look at the behavior of like seeking early feedback, but also just bringing this healthy tension and conflict, at the end of the day, it's this inquisitive nature, this curiosity that product engineers have, this desire to make sure that we're building the right thing, or ensure that we're doing the right problems at the right time. I often hear product engineers, or you might be thinking about asking why, challenging your product manager as to why we're doing something more important. They'll often try, if you like, to use a phrase, try not to write code. What I mean by that is try not to write production code. They'll often, how can we get to an outcome before actually, building it for real, if you like. The other technique I've seen product engineers do, and you might want to try, is they'll often play the movie forward. So what I mean by that is, when we're watching a movie, someone may jump to scene 6 and scene 7 of the movie, and you're still on like a scene 1 or scene 2, and they'll do that by just playing the possible outcomes. So they'll say, or if we ship this and this metric goes up or this other metric goes down, what would we change? Would we change anything, or would we roll it back? So product engineers are often thinking a few steps ahead of, we're going to ship something, we're going to hopefully see a measurable change in behavior of a customer behavior. What then? What happens next? And so they'll expedite a lot of these conversations by playing the movie forward. They'll often be, I've said this before, but my priorities challenged multiple times, so that I wrote here priority and a problem focused. Are we really focused on the right thing? And do we really understand the problem? Every time I've had a product engineer tell me to, question the problem, I've always started with an initial bit of frustration. What do you mean? We've just done 12 interviews and we've looked at this research and I think we've got it. But realize that when a product engineer says that, or someone else says that, you may realize that there's a gap, or we haven't quite got it. If we all don't have that shared brain, then there's something wrong. So I would encourage you as a product engineer to work with your design and your PM and your engineering counterparts to make sure you really do understand the problem that you're solving. And if you like, I wrote here, don't budge till you get it. There's a fine line between being stubborn and just actually wanting to really understand the problem. First, for understanding the problem and the priority and make sure we've got the right one, and keep us all accountable. So as a product engineer, you should really be thinking about doing that. The second word I would use is, if you look at these 2 attributes, so strong opinions, loosely held, and then the ability to quickly build intuition. It's just that at the end of the day, it's this desire for context. I like to think about context in 3 ways. Context for the customer, context for the product, and context for the company. And that can be the vision, the strategy, all that kind of stuff, and the customer problem. And so you as a product engineer, you should be thinking about, how can I be involved in building up my knowledge of those contexts? So you want to find ways to get direct exposure to customers. Ask your PM, ask your designer, ask your engineering lead how you can do more of that. Some PMs triage public-facing, some product engineers triage public-facing Jack tickets triage incoming feedback, get directly on customer calls or customer research. I've already here do product discovery. Discovery is the phase where we go through and we try to understand the problem. At Atlassian, I've seen a bit of an anti-pattern form where we may use the phrase the triad, the PM, the design manager, and the engineering leader do it, and then tell the team at the end. At the end of the day, there's a journey there that the team needs to be involved in some degree. So if you're a product engineer, put your hand up and say, yep, I'd like to be involved in product discovery and do more of that. The last technique I've seen a lot of product engineers do is spend some time understanding the market. What I mean by that is like sign up to competitor tools or adjacent tools of the market and have a play. I've seen engineers do that and write reviews and review them and try to understand the context and what other options customers have, and to try and build some domain knowledge. So there's this constant building of customer and domain context there. Now, as you're doing more and more of that, what I find you'll end up doing as a product engineer is you're probably naturally going to end up taking a bit of ownership. And that may be reflected in these two behaviors that I've written here. There's probably more, but you should be owning the backlog, as in prioritizing the stuff on the backlog, deciding what's happening each sprint. But at the end of the day, you'll end up doing that because you have enough context. And you know, I've seen a lot of product engineers write decisions to drive to a particular business outcome. And that is a good reflection of the domain and the customer context that they have. When I see a product engineer doing that, I go, wow, they've really built a shared brain together because they've done those activities of discovery together, etc., so that they can move the product forward really fast. Yeah, you want to be thinking about how you can take on these product owner-like responsibilities. The last thing I'll call out here is that they end up being great communicators. So they end up being the face of the feature. And I've talked about this before. Internally, we have a blogging culture. You may be championing it. The last two behaviors here is minimizing work on edge cases and at the same time finding all these quick wins. If you go through the sequence of events here where you're talking about, like, you know, building up all the context and being inquisitive, at the end of the day, you end up having so much domain context and so much customer knowledge, and hopefully you're focused on the outcome. You know, at the end of the day, we're trying to see a observable change, a measurable change in a person's behavior. That's what software does at the end of the day. It saves them time, it has a business impact, it reduces something, you know. So they're focused on the outcome. And if they're so focused on the outcome as a product engineer, they're thinking about, how do I minimize the effort to maximize the outcome? And are there ways I can deliver value early and incrementally? Maybe this is the outcome we're going for now, but we can chip away at it over a sequence of events. I often find product engineers will be pushing the backlog and challenging it and adding things to it. Hey, Sharif, I think this is probably, you know, half a day's effort. We should probably do this here because I think the return on this is going to be worthwhile if this is the goal that we're shooting for, because the team's aligned on that. So they're ending up doing that. Really, they end up just influencing the overall solution design and what we end up building. So as a product engineer, have a think about how you may do that in your context. How you can, do you understand your broader goals and the outcomes you're trying to achieve? And if you do, and you're equipped with that, plus the customer context, I think you'll be able to move a whole lot faster. So zooming all the way back up, we start off with these 8 behaviors that I had observed in product engineers. And really, when we group them together, they're you can think of as 4 mindsets, if you like. You know, this desire to be inquisitive, you know, always asking the why, seeking as much customer context, company context, and product context as possible, taking ownership and driving that product backlog and getting to decisions and outcomes. And as a part of that, it's also just being the face, explaining, being the communicator, writing those internal blogs, being the internal champion for those things. And finally, having a strong focus on the customer outcome. And if you do that, you'll end up minimizing those edge cases and maximizing the quick wins that you can find, because you're all aligned on the direction you're headed. I hope I've given you a pretty decent overview of what a product engineer is. I'd love to hear from you if there are other attributes I've missed, or you have any other thoughts on this. Really, you know, cannot emphasize more. Atlassian does need more of them at this stage we're in. We need a balance of all kinds of engineers. I definitely think we're maybe at, you know, time of giving this talk, we're a bit short on this. because at the end of the day, it's going to help speed up decision making across the organization, give everyone more broader context, which can only be good for our customers. So huge thank you for me. If you have any questions, you can ping me, reach me on Slack, Sharif Mansour. Thanks for listening. See you later.